Judge, so this isn't a new thing, because today a lot of people complain about, oh my gosh, the current administration, Congress, everybody else in Washington are ignoring the Constitution. You're saying this has been going on a while.
I'm saying it happened. It began about 100 years ago in the Progressive era. So we're talking about 1900 to 1920, during the presidencies of Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson, who, though they hated each other, though they came from very different backgrounds, and though they ran against each other, shared this common value. They argued that the Constitution does not mean what it says, that it does not limit the federal government, that, in fact, it liberates the federal government to do whatever it wants unless that thing that it wants to do is specifically prohibited in the Constitution. Now, that's not just an academic argument, because that argument, we can do whatever we want, is the opposite of what the framers believed they were creating when they enacted the Constitution, which is the federal government can only do what we've authorized it to do.
Everything else goes to
So
the states.
with a smiling face and promising prosperity and democracy, Woodrow Wilson and Theodore Roosevelt set about micromanaging the country and even people's personal lives from the White House in ways that presidents before them would never have dreamed, but in ways that George W. Bush and Barack Obama would take as commonplace today.
The one's Republican, Roosevelt, and Wilson Democrat, but Roosevelt wasn't really a Republican. He was out in his own area, a progressive Republican.
Roosevelt would live to see his total repudiation by the Republican Party. Remember, he became president when William McKinley was assassinated. TR was his vice president, just a few months into McKinley's second term. So TR effectively serves McKinley's second term as his first term. He's then pretty popular, and he's reelected. He then, following the George Washington tradition, retires. He could have run for a third term, but he retired. And he picked his successor, his Secretary of State, William Taft. So the Secretary of State becomes president, and Roosevelt doesn't like the fact that he's undoing some of these progressive things that Roosevelt put into play. That is, he's shrinking the federal government rather than expanding it. So Roosevelt says to Republican leaders, I want the nomination for a third term. And they say, forget it. You pick this guy to succeed you. He's going to succeed you. He runs in primary elections against the president. He wins these primary elections, but he doesn't get the delegate votes because the delegates are controlled by the political bosses. So he runs as a third-party candidate. So you have an ex-Republican, Theodore Roosevelt, the sitting Republican president, William Howard Taft, and this upstart governor of New Jersey, former president of Princeton, Woodrow Wilson. The three of them are running together in 1912. The conservative and Republican vote are split by William Howard Taft and Theodore Roosevelt, and Wilson gets in with a minority of the popular vote but a majority of the electoral vote. And what does he do? He resumes what Teddy Roosevelt had started and William Howard Taft had tried to undo, and continues this march towards the centralization of government in Washington, D.C.
So this has been going on a long time, but up until 1900-ish, they lived by the founding principles off and on.
Well, the Civil War and Reconstruction are an exception.
Yes.
But with the exception of that, for the most part, the boat of government was rowed by the states prior to the Progressive
Do you think that because it's been going on so long that so many of us never really learned the founding principles, never really understand them, because we haven't heard them, because we live in a contemporary world where we see people that basically ignore a lot of those founding principles?
I think you're writing a review of my book. I mean, what you just said was, in my opinion, a superb summary of the argument in this book. I mean, this has been going on for 100 years. These guys...
Well, this isn't a history book. And I think somewhere I read where somebody commented, you have basically... not put them on trial, but you're not writing a history book.
No, this is the case against them.
Yes.
This is the case you did not get in public school. This is the case you did not get if you graduated from Princeton University, as I did, where Woodrow Wilson is revered. Because the progressive era is taught by teachers in the public schools who believe in the progressive principles, which are that the states are basically racist and don't need their sovereignty, that they don't know how to manage government, that the federal government can right any wrong, regulate any behavior, and tax any event that it wants to. And so public school teachers teach public school students to revere these two not to challenge them or criticize them.
So this is basically new information for a lot of people.
This is the case against them, which you didn't learn from your public school teacher. And by the way, the two of them started federal regulation of public schools by sending cash to the states with strings tied to the cash.
So how do we